Hello and welcome to sim.bc, where it right now is 14:15, and today, mates, we're gonna do a bit of a review. Yay! Review of the questionnaire project, and this is going to be one of those wonderful one-hit wonders. Well, why? Because I need to be in school in like 30 minutes, and this is going to take probably about 15 minutes-ish to record, and then after that I need to fix some stuff, so it probably, even though I'm recording this at like 2:15, this might not come out until like late in the evening. Why? Well, because school is getting in the way. Yeah, life is getting in the way of my projects. I don't like it. Can't you just like pause life and work? Imagine how good that could be, actually. If you could go to work and you could pause the rest of your life, so you could work for like 40 hours a day, actually, and make every progress. Like, you could make all the progress, and then when you get home, you still have like 8 good hours before you need to go to sleep. Wouldn't that be amazing? Probably I'm a minority when I think like that. Like, wonder if I could work more and like, you know, in one day. Not that I don't need to go to work the other day, it's just that I want to work 40 hours a day. Every day of the week. Imagine if that would be possible. And most of you are just gonna sit there and be like, haha, unalive yourself. Yet again, because of YouTube's algorithm, can't say the K word, so to say. I sound like a wuss, am I? Anyway, mates, got a few announcements as well, or announcements, but I recently released a new song, or finished a new song. It's not released on YouTube yet, but it's coming, mates. It's coming. So I actually have 2 in the making that's going to go up on YouTube in the near future, which feels awesome. It feels great. And not only is this going to be a one-hit wonder, this video, but I also have lots of notes. Why? Well, because we've been recapping all of the videos every time here. So I have like a script ready already for the review. But without any further ado, mates, let's get into this. First, I'm going to talk about what we've been doing in the different videos. That's kind of what the notes are about. And then I'm going to talk a bit about, well, how I'm going to apply this knowledge in the future and what I'm going to change and so on and so forth. So, let's get going. Tips and tricks, or rather, this has been, I don't need to read that straight off. This has been some tips and tricks for making an in-between question that is not going to be too hard and not too easy, and simultaneously should be interesting to the audience that you're trying to capture, even if that's survey, or rather, no matter if it's surveys or if you're the lecturer standing in front of an audience, like a physical audience in the room. You want to capture the engagement here. And how do you do this? Well, you probably don't do it by asking easy questions that are so easy so that people are just feeling unengaged and they're just like, is this really a question? Isn't this more of a statement? Is it a rhetorical question because it's so easy? And then, of course, we have the other side of the spectrum where it is a question that is too hard and people are thinking, is this a rhetorical question because it is so hard? Nobody's going to know the answer to it. So you need to make an engaging question so that people actually engage with it, and you need to make it in between hard and easy so that people actually feel, well, challenged enough so that they want to like interact with the question, but not so challenged that I don't see a reason for why they should interact with it to begin with. So, as we have stated a countless number of times at this point over the course of this little project, we know that people tend to drift both in and out of conversation when not feeling engaged, which makes them having a harder time understanding the context in which a question is asked, and hence making said question a harder experience, even though it's objectively, based on the other people in the room, might have been an easy question. The entire point with this is basically that people tend to drift in and out of conversation. Why? Well, because that's just how we operate now, isn't it? Especially students, right? We listen very intensely for about 10 minutes, taking all them notes, right? Writing on the PowerPoint, writing on our notepads, writing on the computers, taking all them notes. And then the teacher is going into a bit of an example. So up until this point, the 10 first minutes has been all about theory. Good, I like that. Then the teacher is going to take up like 4 or 5 examples of the theory, and I'm just sitting there like, and I can go to sleep now, because, well, I don't deem that to be equally as interesting. Well, I do, personally, I do. I think that is really interesting. Apply, trying to get a, a practical implication in the theory, or trying to connect theory to reality. That's always cool, in my opinion. But most students tend not to think that way. So they tend to drift in when they want to listen, and then drift out again, which makes them, well, if you, as a lecturer, ask them a question, you can be all like, I don't know, what are we talking about again? I missed the context. You see what I'm saying? As a student. So, asking necessary questions in order to keep audience engagement is one thing, but it also needs to be kept short and simple. And these are the two first steps then of the, well, what is it going to be? 12 steps that we're going through. So the first step is necessary questions. The second one is short and simple. Not short in the sense that it's supposed to be a short discussion. You can actually make a rather long discussion, but rather that the question takes 15 to 30 seconds to formulate and not 10 long minutes when people can drift in and out. And simple, not in a way that it should be an easy question. Yet again, we're trying to achieve that in-between feeling, but in the sense that it should have one objective to answer instead of 15 different ones, so that people actually know what you're asking for. And this will go again in the next video, that is ask direct questions. Not aggressively direct, not abstractly indirect, but direct enough so that the audience knows what the answer you're looking for, well, is. Because if they don't, then they might think that the question is excessively hard or too easy based on the miscommunication between the speaker and the subject. And what I mean by this is obviously that if you are not, if the people don't know what you're asking for, it doesn't matter if the question is hard or if the question is easy, even if the question is in between. Because if they think that you're asking for, well, what is this? And you want, like, they think that you're looking for a headphone, that's the answer. But what you're actually looking for is that this is a wireless headphone piece, a Bluetooth, I don't know, gadget. Then it doesn't matter if they say that it's a headphone, because it's not that it's not correct, it's just that that wasn't what you were looking for. So make sure that the audience will know what you are looking for, because otherwise it will be a problem. Posting one question at a time can help you as a lecturer to control the development of the discussion while simultaneously engaging the audience through their own interaction in the form of answers, because, well, people are going to give you answers to direct questions. And if you're asking one question at a time, it will help you, well, it will help your students not feeling overwhelmed by information. Because if you ask them, like, what is this, and this, they're going to be like, what was question number 8 and 4 again? I kind of remember question 2 and 3, I think. So ask one question at a time. Plus, since the discussion will be broken up into different voices taking part, because they will give their answers, it's less likely for someone to drift out or completely fall asleep during a presentation of a subject. Because people tend to generally, when they hear a new voice, they'll be like, oh, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna listen to this. And when you change your voices all the time, people are probably going to listen a bit, well, better. Not because they intentionally want to or don't want to, just because I think that that's how we operate. Avoid leading and biased questions, and as I argued in that video, no matter how much it can gain you personally, it generally does not benefit the group. And this is because this approach might close out future perspectives that otherwise could make the discussion better and more vibrant. It's kind of self-explanatory. Remember to speak your respondent's language in order to not alienate a part of your audience and make everyone feel engaged. Yet again, you want everybody to understand what you're talking about in order for them to actually interact with what you're talking about. Rather that you introduce new terms during the course of the session than being unsure if they know it from before. Sometimes people will think that it's boring that you're reintroducing the same term over and over again, but sometimes you will add a different twist to the term and spark an interest in something that they thought they already knew, which is good. This part is really hard and is unfortunately only gained through trial and error, because you need to estimate the knowledge of the audience in a way, and that's really hard to do so. Use scaling whenever possible, when it makes sense, in order to make the easy questions a bit more complex through adding another layer to the conversation, and simultaneously making a hard question easier by letting the audience being able to rely on that, well, this is just my opinion, this is just how I feel. This is mostly in relation to surveys, but you can also use it when you ask people. For instance, the pain scale if you're a doctor. How painful is this on a scale from 1 to 10? Or how much pain do you feel right now? So you can ask that when, like, in real life too, but it's usually used when you're taking a survey. When talking about metrics and grids and general feedback is, and this yet again about surveys mostly, among the many sources of potential errors that can affect surveys are respondents themselves. They sometimes misinterpret questions, respond in socially acceptable ways, and that is because, well, if there is a question that's a bit controversial, people might say that, well, I've been writing my name on the survey, now I'm going to give a socially acceptable answer, because, well, people can relate this back to me. Or give easy answers in hopes that a more interesting question is just around the corner, which I think is quite interesting because it's all about that information overflow. Try and not rely too much on your audience if they answer you with a yes or a no. Instead, trying to rephrase the questions so that the audience need to show you that they actually understand or that they really actually do not understand. And this is all based on, well, If you're just asking a yes or no question, they can say yes and they can say no. And this is a particular skill that people have. They can look you dead in the eye and nod and say yes when you ask them for something and they don't understand what you're talking about. They might not even have heard the question. They've just seen that you've like directed attention to them, and they're just going to look you straight in the eye, dead in the eye, and nod. Sometimes they say yes, yeah, and sometimes they laugh because they just assume that it's something funny. Haha, please hope that that is correct, right? You've all been in that situation probably when you asked your friends a couple of times, like, what did you say, what did you say, what did you say? And in the end you just like, ha ha ha, and hope that it was something funny, because that's generally a positive response. But unfortunately, that doesn't work with your lecturers. Anyway, the 10th point is take your questions for a test drive. This yet again, so understand that, well, when I think that I made the best questionnaire or the best questions ever in the history of the world, that is probably from my perspective, and I have all the context. I have the idea of where I want these questions to go from the beginning. So I might lose out on lots of context by virtue of me not understanding what I'm losing out on. And that might seem very strange, but what I'm saying here is that give your questions to other people so that they can look through it, and if they understand it as well as you do, then maybe you've created the best questionnaire on earth. Maybe you've done the best questions ever made in the history of the world. But most of the time, like a good 99.999%, people are going to be like, what do you mean here? Or this can be changed, or something along those lines. Maybe sometimes they're giving an answer and they're saying, oh, this is really good about cars, and you're like, what? About cars? This was about water bottles. And they're like, you sure? So you need to, well, give it through, no, take it through a test drive, through a test audience, let's say, so that you know that they also understand what you've been trying to convey. The 11th point is added by me. Consider the difference in previous knowledge. And this yet again, setting the stage, present the context, control the flow, and control the flow and know what they're talking about. So understanding the room and understanding that there is a distinct difference between my previous knowledge within the subject and the people that I'm going to teach in the subject. An example of this is a PhD student teaching in high school, because the PhD student is probably going to know everything that there is to know about logistics, the cutting edge things and the terminology as well. And then when they come in and going to try and talk in front of a high school class, most of them are probably not, they don't even know what supply and demand is probably. So you will need to discuss it with them on such a fundamental level that maybe you are having a hard time identifying which terms they will understand and which terms you can use. So that's an art of in itself, that you should be able to cater your language and cater your understanding and cater the way that you're teaching to your audience. Yet again, it's kind of a semi-point based on the language point, speaker respondent's language, but I think it's interesting enough. It's important enough to mention on its own. 12th point is also added by me, and that's ethical questions, and as so neatly I described it and stuff, and that is yesterday's video. So ethical questions is important because the ethical perspective of questions, making sure that you're not racially biased, making sure that you don't have any preemptive assumptions, and making sure that you're asking questions that are not interfering with potentially, well, what you would say, ethical approaches. So if you're discussing religion, for instance, so this is going to be such a bad example because so many people have so strong opinions about religion. But if you ask something, okay, let's just have it ambiguous, right? Let's say that you ask something about a specific religion to someone who is from another religion, and they don't agree religion-wise because for some reason there is a difference in these religions, but you as a teacher saying this is the first religion is right. Isn't that right? And that person is then forced to be able to give the answer that, yeah, sure, I agree with that religion, even though they are of another religion and they really think about this religion as being correct, and now they need to say that the other one is correct. You see what I'm saying? It's a bit complex, but thinking about the ethical implications of what you're actually doing. So these are some of the points that I think are really interesting and really good to keep in the back of your head when making different questionnaires or making questions overall to a lecture hall, because it's so important, the question part, right? Because the question part is controlling controlling the development. It's about controlling that people understand what you're talking about. It's about creating a discussion and creating a deeper understanding of what you're talking about, introducing new perspectives to the field. It's about see if the people actually understood the terminology you used. It's about seeing if the information flow was too great, see to if the subject's actually interesting enough, if people are actually interested in interacting with it. It's so many things you can get out of questions alone, which I didn't think there were when I started this. To be honest, right, when I started this little project, I was just thinking about, questions is kind of hard to phrase, right? Aren't they? And when I looked into it, I found all of these tips and tricks and some additional ones that I added. And there are so many things behind a question that makes it a good or a bad question, which I thought was, well, it's really interesting and really, really cool. What will I use in the future then going forward? Well, I will definitely be thinking about this when writing my thesis, or our thesis, because we're going to write it in a group. Why? Because we need to, well, work in groups, because we're going to prepare for the management life in the future and so on and so forth. You know, teams, all about them teams, writing groups. So what I'm going to take out of this is that when we're making our thesis, we're probably going to utilize surveys, and then I'm going to apply this knowledge that I've gained to the surveys when we're going to ask different companies about our topic in the thesis. And simultaneously, I'm also going to be a bit sneaky, and when I'm talking to the people in my team, I can think about these things when posing questions to them, because maybe it is the case that we're writing different parts of the thesis. Let's just say we're probably not going to do that, because that's, in my opinion, stupid, because that just means that the red thread is going to be harder to follow and you need to rewrite everything anyway. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that we do, and I need to present my part to the other people so that they understand what it's all about after they've read it, so that they know what I wanted to get out of it. Now that I'm going to ask questions, control questions, in order to understand if they understood what I've been talking about. So then I can utilize these questions again and these tips again. So there are many things that I actually want to take out from this, and it's really interesting that something so small, an idea so small from my part, became so great when I was looking into it. And not great in the sense that this was the best thing ever, this is so funny, entertaining, and good. Not that in that sense, but in the sense that there are so many layers to questions that I didn't have a clue about before, that I now have a elementary understanding of, that there are more things to a question than just a question mark, which I thought was really, that was a good ending. Yeah, let's end on that. There are more things to questions than just a question mark. I mean, have you ever heard a better ending to a review in your life? I know, I'm a bit smug. Anyway, mates, that was everything for today, mates, and I'm going to see you tomorrow. And I can tease it already. I'm thinking about start using Adobe Premiere, I think it's called. Premiere Effects, something along those lines, which is Adobe's editing program instead of iMovie. So leave a comment what you think about that, and if you have some tips on how I can utilize it, because I'm going to be all fresh on it yet again, and yeah, my technical expertise isn't the best. Anyway, mates, have a nice one. See you tomorrow.